Chair recognizes Ms. Crockett from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to talk about CARS, cons, concepts of a plan, and compensation. I'm going to actually start with the cons. There has been mention of DOGE and how that is going to come into play. And I'm curious to know, just yes or no, Inspector General Hull, quick question. Have you found that if the post office was to cut its workforce by 75%, that would somehow fix all of the problems within the post office? Yes or no?
No, we've not done any work in that area like that.
Thank you. Postmaster DeJoy, are you anticipating that a 75% cut in your workforce would solve all of the problems of the post office? Yes or no?
No.
Okay. So it's interesting because my colleagues seem to be so excited because there's a new sheriff in town, and the co-sheriffs of the DOGE committee, more specifically, Mr. Ramaswamy, has actually proposed cutting 75% of our federal workforce to try to rein in some of the spending. Now, I want to talk about cars because cars have been discussed a lot as well as it relates to spending. And I want to know from you, Postmaster General, can you tell me approximately what is the lifespan of one of your postal vehicles?
So,
And I know you have various vehicles,
Yeah.
so let me just say the letter carrier vehicles that they drive.
letter carriers have a few different vehicles. Commercial off-the-shelf vehicles will last us 6-7 years.
Okay.
The special purpose built vehicles that we had, the LLVs that we had were supposed to last 20. We're using them 30. Our new vehicles that we're buying, a special purpose vehicle, we expect to last longer than 20 years or longer.
Okay. So as we are comparing the various costs, and there's been a lot of conversation about the fact that there are electric vehicles, and it's my understanding that the electric vehicles are the ones that now have air conditioning, correct?
All the vehicles now have air conditioning.
Okay.
But yes.
You know, earlier it was brought up, and the reason that I care so deeply about the vehicle situation is that my constituent, Eugene Gates, was brought up earlier, who lost his life. This was somebody who did not need extra hours of training on how to properly hydrate because this was someone who dedicated almost 40 years of his life to the post office. The reality is that the working conditions were not working. That's just the reality. This is someone who had done this job for so long. And I'm going to be honest, and I know that your office has received letters from us regarding Mr. Gates, but I am concerned, as my colleague, Mr. Kassar, laid out, that we still haven't figured out how to modernize and make sure that the working environment is going to work for our postal employees. So for instance, as you are rolling out these new vehicles, have you decided on a way to prioritize where these vehicles are going to go? And does that overlap with the areas in which we know, say, experience the most extreme heat conditions, such as in places like Texas? Have they been prioritized?
Yeah, so we're not filling the whole need, right? So there is a process of replacement of vehicles that.
Let me, and I'm gonna have to cut you because I've got to get to a few more things and I'm running out of time. So I'm just curious, are we prioritizing? Even if it means that you're gonna swap out, let's say the vehicles aren't necessarily up for being swapped out in Texas, but we know that in another area, they don't experience the extreme heat. So we move those vehicles, those areas, and make sure that the vehicles that are going to keep our postal employees safe are put into those areas that they're needed the most. Has that been a consideration?
We consider a lot of the country gets heat, and
I understand. We get extreme heat, is what I'm saying.
I will get you the process. I would say that it would not satisfy you to see that just Texas is getting any special difference. We have a bunch of procedures and strategies that we had to deploy vehicles. Let me get those for you.
Okay, I'd appreciate that.
Okay.
As it relates to delivering for America, it feels as if it's more a concept of a plan than an actual plan because as you've stated earlier in your testimony, you had projections, and clearly those projections were completely off. But even as I've had my team, as we've sat here, really comb through and make sure that we didn't miss it, Delivering for America, correct me if I'm wrong, does it deal with drones at all?
No.
Okay. So when we're talking about modernizing, do you not believe that it would be incumbent upon your organization to consider something like drones? Because as I've stated before, not only do I currently represent urban Dallas, Texas area, but I lived in East Texas, and I know what it looks like when you're trying to deliver, say, in rural America. And I know that there are other organizations that are doing things such as drone deliveries, which, number one, if you don't have the workforce that you need, it is very helpful. Number two, it's a lot more efficient because now you're talking about homes that are separated so far. And as you've heard from some of my colleagues in rural America talking about the delivery problems, I don't know how we can talk about modernization of any part of federal government and not talk about drones. We talk about it when we're talking about the border. We talk about it when we're talking about our military. And I'm just asking that if we are going to talk about a plan that really is looking at modernization, we look at something like drones, especially if DOJ gets their way and they start to get rid of some of your workforce. This potentially would be something that you would need. And the final thing that I have to say, I know I'm a little over, but I'm just asking for a little bit of leeway, is on the compensation piece. I will be honest with you and tell you that before walking in today, I was completely unaware of the fact that your compensation was so high. All I know is that as it was laid out before, your compensation has gone up approximately 17% since you've been in this post, and you consider yourself to have a grade A. I'm just curious to know, on average, when we look at our postal workers, such as workers like my constituent Eugene, who had been with the post office and literally gave his life of service to the post office, and he had been there for almost 40 years, on average, are we seeing that there's an increase in compensation to the tune of approximately 17% in the same time span as you've been with the post office for the average postal employee?
I think that over the last 4 years, and I mean, I don't know that it's a relevant comparison, but I think wages have gone up about 15%.
Okay. And my